By the time the sheriff's deputy pulled up to my property, my front yard looked like a crime scene where the victim was basic sanitation. Raw sewage was bubbling out of my culvert like some cursed chocolate fountain, flowing across my gravel driveway and pooling against my porch steps. Toilet paper streamers hung from my rose bushes like the world's worst party decorations. The smell was so thick it felt like it had actual weight to it. Deputy Klein stepped out of his cruiser, took one breath, gagged slightly, and muttered something about biological hazards. Across the dirt road, on the HOA-owned amenities meadow, a cluster of folding chairs, fairy lights, and a partially deflated balloon arch sat abandoned. It looked like a failed Pinterest project for rustic country wine night. A banner, now speckled with brown flecks, flapped sadly in the breeze. "Welcome to Fox Hollow Estates Private Members Gala," it proclaimed. I stood on my porch in ruined boots and splashed jeans, holding a folder full of emails and violation notices. "This," I told the deputy while pointing to the bubbling sewage, "is what happened when I told the HOA they couldn't use my field for their private wine party." Deputy Klein squinted, following the flow of sewage back up the ditch. It led straight to a suspiciously fresh PVC line snaking out from the HOA's decorative pump shed. He turned back toward me with raised eyebrows. "Start from the beginning, mister," he said, pulling out his notepad. "My name is Graham Kell," I replied. "And who exactly is responsible for this?" he asked, nodding at the HOA office across the road. Right on cue, the door slammed open and out marched the president of the HOA, heels clacking angrily on the steps. Patricia Dane emerged with her clipboard in hand, pearls gleaming, nose wrinkling as if she weren't the architect of this entire disaster. "This," I answered the deputy calmly, "is all because Patricia didn't like the word no. I'm not built for drama. At 38 years old, I'm a software engineer with a flannel wardrobe and the kind of personality that considers a wild night to be watching 2 movies in a row while eating real mashed potatoes instead of the powdered kind. When my grandmother died and left me her little country home on the outskirts of Fox Hollow Estates near Mapleford, I thought I'd finally found peace. A couple of acres, a small creek, a red barn that leaned just enough to feel charming instead of condemned. The property wasn't technically in the HOA. My parcel existed as an older, grandfathered lot. But it shared the same access road and the same scenic view as the rest of the neighborhood. I learned about the HOA the way most people do, with a passive-aggressive letter. "Welcome new neighbor," it said at the top in cheerful teal font. Below that, in much smaller print, it explained that while my property was technically exempt, they strongly encouraged compliance with Fox Hollow Estates community standards to preserve neighborhood values. The letter was signed by Patricia Dane, HOA president, with a looping signature that screamed I correct waiters at restaurants. I shrugged, stuck the letter on my fridge, and went back to my quiet life of remote work, tending tomato plants, and fixing whatever my old house decided to break that week. I waved at neighbors when they drove by in their SU Versus. I kept my grass neat, my music low, and my drama level at absolute 0. Then Patricia discovered my field. It was a wide, flat patch at the edge of my property, just past the tree line. Perfect for seeing stars, watching fireflies, or if you were Patricia, envisioning overpriced catered events where people pretend boxed wine has notes of oak. The first time she showed up, she didn't knock. I opened my front door to find her already on the porch, like a Jehovah's Witness for bylaws. "Mr. Kell, I'm Patricia," she announced as if that alone should unlock gates. "I wanted to discuss opportunities for your currently underutilized pasture." I blinked at her. "You mean my field?" I asked. "Yes," she replied with a hint of annoyance at my lack of better branding. "The HOA board is planning a private member gala. We've decided your field is the ideal location." "You've decided," I repeated slowly, trying to process her audacity. "Of course," she said brightly. "It's for the good of the community." I smiled politely and told her I wasn't in the HOA. Her smile barely twitched. "We like to think of that as a technicality," she replied smoothly. I didn't say no immediately because conflict gives me hives. I told her I'd think about it. Then Patricia emailed me a proposed usage agreement that was absolutely insane. It included a mandatory donation of the field once per quarter, a prohibition on me being on my own property during their events, and a clause giving the HOA decor rights, which sounded like an actual threat. Just for extra spice, There was a line near the end warning that refusal to cooperate may impact my eligibility for future community considerations, including but not limited to road maintenance scheduling and access to neighborhood utilities. I emailed back a very polite no thanks. Patricia's reply was 4 paragraphs of weaponized politeness and legal-sounding phrases that she definitely got from Google. It ended with "We are disappointed you are unwilling to be a team player." 2 days later, I found my mailbox tagged with an official-looking yellow paper. Notice of Community Standard Infringement, it declared. Listed violations included unapproved outbuilding color because my barn was red outside their acceptable palette, non-compliant mailbox design, and excessive natural vegetation along ditch line. I stared at the notice, then at my barn that had been red since 1952, then at my completely normal black metal mailbox that I'd had for a year without any issue. I emailed Patricia and told her I wasn't in the HOA and she couldn't cite me. She responded within minutes. Our standards extend to all properties that materially impact the aesthetic continuity of Fox Hollow Estates, she wrote. A week later, Patricia showed up with a tape measure and a camera, walking my fence line like a silent auditor. I stepped outside and asked if I could help her. "Just documenting," she said while snapping photos of my barn, my garden, my truck. "We've received complaints." "From who?" I asked with obvious sarcasm. "The squirrels?" She sniffed dismissively. "The community," she replied. "And that drainage ditch by the road? That is a safety hazard. The board has concerns." "The county owns the ditch," I pointed out. "Not according to our interpretation," she countered. Every time I refused to reconsider letting the HOA use my field, a new notice appeared. My motion sensor camera caught Patricia stepping onto my property to leave them on my porch instead of in the mailbox, probably to avoid mail fraud charges. I began a folder labeled HOA Nonsense. It filled up quickly. Then the rumors started. A neighbor across the road, a tired-looking guy named Jared, quietly warned me that Patricia was telling people I was preparing to rent the barn out to undesirable tenants. "Like who?" I asked him. She said, and I quote, "potentially biker gangs or survivalist camps." Jared replied with an apologetic shrug. I was apparently now the threat of Fox Hollow Estates, despite the fact that an unexpected FaceTime call gave me a mild adrenaline spike. The real turning point happened on a Tuesday morning when I woke up to no water. I turned the faucet and it wheezed, spit out sludge-colored liquid, then nothing. I went outside to check the wellhead and the small pump house by the road that housed some shared infrastructure the older lots had been grandfathered into. That's when I saw it. A brand new padlock on the pump shed door. And a laminated notice zip-tied to the handle. Due to non-compliance with community standards and delinquent cooperation, access to shared utilities is under review. Contact HOA for resolution, it read. Signed by the Fox Hollow Estates Board. I felt my usual calm completely snap. I took pictures. I called the county. Then, because Patricia had apparently decided to escalate into actual crimes, I called a lawyer. The county got back to me first. "Sir," the utilities guy said on the phone, "the HOA doesn't have any authority to touch that infrastructure. That's public-private maintained. Also, wait, what's this about them planning to install a temporary gray water line across your roadside ditch?" "A what now?" I asked as my stomach dropped. The next day, 2 men in reflective vests showed up with a small trencher, accompanied by Patricia in a blazer and sunglasses like a low-budget FEMA director. I intercepted them at the ditch. "What are you doing?" I demanded. Patricia gave me a too bright smile. "We're improving drainage for the community," she said smoothly. The worker hesitated and looked at her. "Ma'am, this line's supposed to connect to," he started to say. Patricia cut him off sharply. "The approved discharge point." "Yes." I recorded the whole thing on my phone. I watched as they ran a PVC line from the HOA's community septic pump, installed for the newer houses, down toward the ditch that ran along my property. The discharge point was suspiciously close to my culvert. The county inspector arrived half an hour later. The moment he saw the setup, his eyebrows nearly launched off his face. "They can't do this," he told me quietly. "This is not a drainage line. This is an overflow. For wastewater. Discharging here would be a huge violation." He took pictures, measured things, and made disapproving noises. "What happens if they turn it on?" I asked nervously. "Hope you like waiting," the inspector said grimly. "And you said they cut your water access?" I nodded. "Padlocked the pump shed." The inspector's jaw tightened visibly. "I'm calling the health department. And maybe the state environmental office." By Friday, there were 3 different agencies involved, plus a sheriff's report just in case. Patricia, however, seemed serenely confident. Her emails to me became almost gleeful, as if she was daring me to escalate further. Then, on the night of the HOA's private members' gala, everything exploded. Literally. The gala was supposed to be Patricia's crown jewel. Catered appetizers, string lights, and the HOA board basking in their own reflected importance on the meadow across from my driveway. But the county had already issued a cease and desist order on the septic drainage improvements. Something Patricia disagreed with, apparently. So she had the contractor finish the connection anyway that afternoon, banking on the fact that no one would shut her down on a weekend evening. The problem with treating environmental regulations like suggestions is that physics does not care about your bylaws. Around 7 p.m., I noticed the faint gurgling sound. By 7:10, my ditch was full of suspiciously murky water. By 7:15, it had backed up through my culvert and was spilling over my driveway. By 7:20, my yard was a shallow, reeking lagoon of untreated sewage, glowing cheerfully under the HOA's string lights from across the road. I had already placed a probable non-compliance call earlier that week, so I dialed the emergency health department hotline, then the sheriff's office. By the time Deputy Klein arrived with flashing lights, so did the county health inspector, the State Department of Environmental Quality representative, and cherry on top, a local news van that had been tipped off by someone in the county office with a sense of irony. They all followed the trail of sludge up the ditch to the shiny new PVC pipe leading from the HOA pump building. Patricia tried her best to talk over the scene with forced confidence. "There must be some mistake. This is stormwater. It's perfectly safe," she insisted. The DEQ guy cut her off immediately. "Ma'am, I can see toilet paper in it," he said flatly. The health inspector walked up to me with a serious expression. "Mr. Kell, you said you did not authorize any easement or discharge onto your property." "Correct," I confirmed, holding up the HOA emails and my folder. "I told them no. Repeatedly. They did this because I wouldn't let them use my field." The inspector took one look at the emails and documents. He turned to Patricia with barely contained anger. "I sincerely hope you like lawyers," he said coldly. In that moment, the entire power dynamic flipped like a breaker. Patricia, who had spent months acting like a petty dictator, now stood surrounded by uniformed officials and cameras, ankle-deep in her own metaphorical and literal mess. The investigation moved fast. Within days, the HOA was issued a massive fine for illegal discharge of untreated wastewater. The county ordered an immediate shutdown of their septic pump system pending compliance. Several homeowners in Fox Hollow Estates, suddenly unable to flush, discovered the joy of Patricia's cost-saving infrastructure decisions. The best part came in the form of an email I received from my lawyer. Attached was a copy of a civil complaint drafted on my behalf. Property damage, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, you name it. The lawyer's note read, "Given the clear documentation and multiple regulatory violations, they will almost certainly settle. Generously." Word got out fast. At the next HOA meeting, held in the echoing, mostly empty clubhouse, dozens of residents showed up. Not for wine and cheese, but with pitchfork energy. "So let me get this straight," one homeowner demanded while waving a notice. "Our dues were used to install an illegal sewage line so you could throw a party in a field that doesn't belong to us?" Patricia, suddenly less polished, stammered something about community enhancement and temporary inconvenience. The treasurer, a nervous man with permanently furrowed eyebrows, cleared his throat nervously. "Also, our general fund is, negative." After the emergency attorney retainer. The room fell silent. Then erupted into chaos. Multiple homeowners called for Patricia's resignation. Others called for an audit. One woman announced loudly that she was done living in a dictatorship run by Pinterest Mussolini. A week later, Patricia stepped down as HOA president for personal reasons. Her replacement sent me an email that started with "We deeply regret the actions of the prior board" and ended with "We are prepared to offer a settlement." The number attached had more zeros than my annual property tax. Meanwhile, the DEQ investigation concluded with a delightful flourish. Patricia herself was named personally liable for part of the fines because she'd signed off on the unauthorized work and had emailed the contractor instructions to ignore any county overreach. Those emails were obtained through public records and printed in full in a small article in the Mapleford Gazette under the headline "HOA President Faces Fines Over Illegal Sewage Dumping." The accompanying photo of Patricia, blinking mid-sentence at the Gala, ankle-deep in sewage, was absolutely perfect. The total fines came to over $50,000 split between the HOA and Patricia personally. When the treasurer read out the numbers at the emergency board meeting, Patricia's face went completely white. She tried to speak, but no words came out. She just stood there, frozen, as the entire room stared at her in stunned silence and barely contained fury.